This is the Big Woods Bucks podcast. Come explore the big woods and timber in North America with your host, Maine master guide and deer tracking expert Hal Blood. Listen to Hal and co-hosts Lee Libby and Joe Cruzy as they unlock the secrets of big woods whitetails. Each episode will provide valuable insights into the tried and true system Hal has used for the last 40 years to scout, locate, and hunt mature big woods bucks. Listen and laugh as the crew discusses Hal's legendary adventures and learn how to apply a lifetime's worth of lessons from the big woods to your own hunting and outdoor adventures.
Welcome to the Big Woods Bucks podcast. I'm Hal Blood, your host, and with me is Lee Libby.
Hey, Hal.
And Joe Cruzy.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about a little scouting.
Scouting.
That's
about right about this time of year, isn't it?
Getting close.
Yeah.
Getting close. We're in right now the fall season with the leaves changing and all that. But I tell you, I see a lot of people out. They go out and they go scouting now. People are all interested in their trail cameras, but I really don't do any scouting till a week before the season. I say that to people and they look at me like I got four eyeballs, but I don't. I do most of my actual scouting is when I'm hunting. I'm always scouting anyway. So, but I scout a week before the season. I'll tell you why, because the leaves have been down a week or two. So now you can start to see tracks again. And I do it again in the spring, like in right after the snow leaves, because you'll still see any buck sign left from the year before. So you got a window of a few weeks in the spring. You actually have longer in the spring to scout before it greens up than in the fall. And another reason is those bucks where they are through the summer and even September, they're not going to be there by deer season. They're in this, I call this summer range. As soon as those leaves fall off the trees, these old mature bucks, they feel like they're exposed again, and they're going to go hang out more where it's some green bluff somewhere or get somewhere where there's a little more cover, so they move. So there really isn't a heck of a lot of sense in scouting, too early.
Yeah, I've always found that it's so, like everything else hunting big woods, it's so drastically different than what you typically see, on TV shows and reading the magazines, because scouting in the Midwest is you're looking at your bedding and feeding areas and getting in transition areas and all that sort of thing. And for me, it's an excuse just to get in the woods, and that's about it. If you can pick something up from it, that's great. But like you said, hunting is the best scout, and it's showing you, where the tracks are telling you where the deer are and what they're doing. And
yeah, well, they haven't laid in the summer and the fall. They haven't laid down any sign either. So what are you looking for? You're not going to see deer probably. In the Midwest, they can use binoculars. They see them out in the fields because that's where they have to feed. But up here in the big woods, it's woods. They're in the woods. They don't have to go any particular place to feed. They just wander and feed. And another reason is I don't like wandering around in the woods with that foliage, and especially when it's warmer, I like to feel like it's hunting season when I scout. I guess that's the way I'd put it. What about you, Lee?
Yeah, I mean, realistically, it probably started last year when you finally put your gun away and you remember the ones that you tracked and you didn't kill, or that one's still alive because nobody's been in there. But I think about the same. I'll start a couple weeks before the season and just run around, and those bucks will start moving again. And we all know those favorite spots that we have where they cross, right? Just go poke around.
Just got to go make a check, see if that signpost rub is hit again or something like that.
Yeah, and that's there's so many topics we touch on that are different here in the big woods than they are elsewhere. I mean, we've got migration routes up here, later in the season.
Yeah.
Things like that. Your scouting might find an area that the deer are traveling all the time late in the season. But it's like the trail camera thing. I love messing with trail cameras, but it's more about just seeing what's out there. It's just something else to do and another reason to get in the woods more than trying to pinpoint a buck. I got a picture of a buck last year, 2 miles from here where we're sitting right now, and it was just one faint, dark picture where I could just see one side of his rack but he is a monster, and it gets you excited, and
Yeah,
you spend a
definitely.
lot of time. If you're lucky enough to cut some nice tracks in that area when there's snow, you've always got that in the back of your mind that this could be the one.
Yeah. Or he could be 10 miles from there.
That's right. That's exactly right. And
That's what people don't realize about here, too, is because the deer density is so much lower than a lot of places, these bucks have to travel to get enough breeding in. A guy I know that's got a camp up north was telling me, this has been just a few years ago, he puts out 40 trail cameras up in the North Maine woods in his areas he likes to hunt. He puts out 40 of them. He's right into it. And he shot a buck, I think it's 3 years ago now, and he didn't realize it when he shot it. He just picked up a track from the road or something, and he shot this buck. And when he got looking at it, it was one he had on a trail camera 15 miles from where he shot it. 15 miles. So you can use your trail cameras, but you're not going to pattern a buck by it. You know what I mean? There's just that's no help in patterning one, because some of these places, I've played with trail cameras enough that I see you might get some bucks on a trail camera, even on a signpost where it's a natural travel place for them, twice in the whole season. They've got such a big area to cover, and then they get hung up in a rut with a doe. They just don't get back around there, So you can't put a lot of faith in it.
I always look at scouting up in this area. For me, it's finding pockets of does, because that's where the bucks are going to be, and it's never about. I mean, I kind of crack up when I see these shows and stuff where they'll have names to all their bucks on camera and everything, and it's not. For me personally, that's not too appealing. I think part of the allure up here is never knowing what you're going to see, and
right,
and it's almost an impossible thing to do to try to, get a deer on camera and then, that's the buck I'm going to shoot. That's the one.
Yeah, because even if you get them at a signpost or something, and then you keep going and looking for a track there, it doesn't mean it's his, because usually there's more than one buck coming by there. Could be, but you wouldn't be guaranteed it. Like I said, they might only come by there a couple times in the season. So that's what's fun about it up here, though, the mystique, huh, Lee? You never know.
I mean, they spent how many weeks in the remote camp for you, 4 or 5 weeks a year, and get in the truck in the morning and go check those hot spots for a buck track or a signpost, and all of a sudden you catch one coming down in from Canada that's just a monster, and he enters the country on one side of the township and leaves the country on the other side of the township and does a 7-mile loop in the middle of the night and is gone.
Yeah.
It's like, for what? He never touched a thing.
Yeah.
Just walked through and checked it out and left. So, yeah, if you get him, you get him. If you don't, you don't. But every day you're looking for... I guess the thing about scouting is instead of just... A lot of guys like to pick up tracks from the road. It's one of my favorite things to do, I like to take my cup of coffee and head out at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I have a certain route that I travel, and that certain route every year changes a little bit based on the buck sign that I found during scouting, because I always check where the biggest ones were. And you might catch them, you might not, but usually by 7:30, 8 o'clock, you got something to go on, and if you don't, then you got to hoof it for a little bit. But if you just ride these dirt roads aimlessly looking for a buck track, that you waste a lot of time. But if you have half a dozen hot spots that you have chased bucks out of before, then why not go there first?
Yeah.
Do you think it's become, years ago, it was probably before the cutting was what it is today, it was probably easier. I think you could consistently go back to, say, a cedar swamp or something and know that there was going to be holding deer, as opposed to now where a cut might hold deer and they might be finding their feed there now, but, 6-7 years from now it's going to be a different. Do you find that to be the case?
Yeah, the cuts are great for deer. That's really the cuttings are the agriculture of the North Woods. Anywhere there's logging, that's the crop. That's the food crop for the deer. So the new cuts are the best. As soon as they make a cut, when they disturb the ground with the machines, there'll always be nice green plants grow up in those skid trails, and there's also browse that grows from wherever they cut. There'll be new shoots of maple or birch or whatever. That's all that new growth is the best feed for them, and that's where the does take their they take their little ones there, because they have to get those fawns grown up. You know, they're going to have a long winter, and they're only going to be basically 6 months old going in the winter. So they got to get those fawns grown up. So the does will seek out the best feed, and it's probably the first 4 or 5 years in a cut. There's still enough feed, and depends how they cut. Sometimes a cut will last longer than that. If it's a real select cut, things don't grow as fast. But basically, if it's a pretty open cut, after 4 or 5 years, everything that's, that they would eat is beyond their reach now. It's moose feed, So they just seek out the next cut. They hear the machines in the distance or whatever, and they'll find another cut to go to, and that's the nature of it. And that's why the bucks will change their travel patterns, not necessarily every year, but they'll change according to where the does are. So if some does have moved a mile away to some other cuts, well, guess what? That buck isn't going to waste his time where there isn't any does, so he just adjusts his travel route to go by those does, and it's just the nature of it. So that's part of scouting. You're not only scouting for buck sign, you're scouting for where those does, pockets of does are that particular year, because you might have a few does in around one cutting, and there might not be another one for a half a mile or a mile. You got to travel to get to the next little pocket. But if you know where those does are, that's good information when the rut starts, because every buck within 10 miles of there is going to check on those does.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the radio tracking study we talked a little bit about really showed that is, for whatever reason, whether it's feed or cover, those does are very selective on where they end up, and it's almost like they have a specific spot they're heading to, and they have it in mind, and they go to that area and then head back to the wintering area after.
Yeah, especially anywhere a deer travels, they learned it from another deer. They didn't just say, I guess I'll go here. So those older does, they're kind of like the matriarchs. They take their fawns to a particular place for the winter, a particular place in the summer to feed. They remember that, so they'll start going there when they're on their own, especially the does. Then the bucks, even a buck in his first year, when he's a spike horn, a yearling buck, crotch horn, spike horn, whatever he happens to be, he'll start following around where there's other bucks, because he's in training to be a big buck. He'll go to a signpost. He might even put his scent on that signpost. He's not doing much damage to the tree, but they're learning from the bucks, and they'll continue on going to those same places their whole life. That's what they learn. As the older they get, they spread their territory more, but they learn it. The bucks will learn to travel from other bucks. Well, I got to say, and bucks go where bucks go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to find them places. That's what scouting's about.
Yeah, and that, scouting tracking is, to me, tracking's always been, of course you're in the moment and you're hunting, but you're always thinking about, oh man, this is a spot. Oh, I got to remember this spot. Oh, I got to, you're just constantly scouting. And last year was one of those years for me that I found a couple spots that I just can't wait to get back to this year and check them out. And it's going to be interesting to see if it's holding the numbers of deer that it did last year. I'm pretty certain, because of the kind of country it was and the feed and everything, that it will be. But I don't think they'll be moving on from there. But it's that's part of the fun is finding those new areas and finding the pockets like that.
Yeah, I do. I find most of my new deer hunting areas following a buck somewhere. He goes out of where I started from. Even if I was familiar with that, he might end up 5 miles away into some little pocket of deer somewhere else, and you find another cool spot to go check out.
there's guys that are coming up. There's some guys that you've guided in the past, I know, that come up every year, and they've got the area they hunt. They put cameras out. How often do they ever kill bucks that they get on camera?
Not very often, and I haven't either. All the years I've put out trail cameras, one of my buddies shot a buck on there, and we didn't even know it until I pulled the trigger. He shot the buck with his muzzle loader the second day, and then I went and pulled that camera. I had it there the whole season, and when I got back and I looked at the pictures, I'm looking at him like, boy, that looks like Steve's buck right there. And I got looking at him, and it was the one he'd shot, and that camera was about, at least a couple of miles from where he'd shot it and picked it up and stuff. It was like 2 valleys over, 2 ridges and 2 valleys over. And then one of the guys has a picture of the buck I shot the Friday of Thanksgiving week there, and I picked up a buck, and I ended up shooting that buck. And he said when I sent the picture to him, he said, I think I got him on one of my trail cameras. And he sent the picture to me. Sure enough, he did. He had that
no kidding
buck on the trail. And that one was quite close. He had it on a trail camera right in the same ravine where I picked the buck up. I don't think the buck was just staying there, but just happened to be,
Good picture of it?
No, it's a night picture, so it's not the best picture, but it's a picture anyways.
We're going to take a few minutes here, take a break, and touch a little bit on using maps and satellite photos for scouting.
Hey everyone, Hal here. You want to join the hunting club as soon as you can, because that's where you're going to get all my information. I'll have short film hunts, video tips, articles every month, and there's also a forum on there for you people to communicate. Maybe you'll meet a new hunting buddy on there. And the other thing is a question of the month. Submit a question, and I'll pick one every month to answer, and the winner is going to end up getting a decal for their truck. Join up at bigwoodsbucks.com. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, we're back.
Yeah, welcome back. We said when we come back, we're going to talk about maps, satellite imagery, and that kind of stuff, because it's a good way to start, especially if you're not familiar and you want to start hunting in a new area, especially in the bigger woods where it's not just woodlots or something that are easy to hunt. You got to have a map to go by, and especially in unfamiliar territory, carry it with you. It's a handy tool to have to carry with you, but they're also pretty handy for scouting. I know Lee takes his in his pocket everywhere he goes.
Yeah.
That's just to find his way around.
Yeah. I think your main map is your Gazette map, right? You carry in the truck, the Atlas. Yeah.
I usually buy a new one every year, just because the other ones usually get pages ripped out of them. If I'm in a strange country, if I'm up in the Allagash or something, I'll rip the map a page out of the map and stick it in my backpack and go. But,
I think I got one of your maps, and I ripped some pages out of it.
Yeah, everybody's like, Liv, you're missing pages in your map. I'm like, oh, there'll be a new one next year.
Yeah, well, they make those for every state, too, I guess, huh?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's DeLorme. Atlas.
Do they make them for every state now that they've
I'm not
gone
sure.
and bought DeLorme?
Yeah, I've got them for New York because I know when we was talking about hunting out there.
Right. Well, they made Garmin bought DeLorme, the company in Maine that made that map and the GPS and all of that stuff. So I'm not sure if they make them for all the states anymore. I know they kept up with Maine and probably New England here, but it's a great resource because it's just like having a road atlas in your truck, but it's got all the logging roads, gates, streams, ditches. It's got topography. The scale is kind of big, but you get the general idea of where you are from that map. And then if you want to get a topo map, a USGS to carry with you, it's kind of a good idea that it's more detailed when you get into a smaller area there. I shouldn't say a smaller area, but it covers less, so it's more detailed for you when you get zeroed in.
Yeah, it's the old USGS used to be. I used to love those things, but now with the satellite images, like Lee had talked about it before, how they're outdated. But the best thing I get from them now is with the 3D feature on like the Google Earth Pro or any of those. 3D is phenomenal. You can go right down and see the mountains and the valleys, and it can be real helpful for figuring out where the bucks might travel, and and the best ways to get around those spots anyway. And a lot of times that happens after you've already been to a spot and hunted it one time, and you go, I want to look at that.
Yeah.
Check it out on the computer, and
yeah, I do that a lot, and I'm not a techie person. I'm old.
Come
school.
on.
Just ask Chris.
Every time I see you, just surfing around on your phone and
Oh yeah.
Snapchatted.
yeah.
Instagram.
Yeah, all of that stuff. Yeah, that's me.
Oh my God, I'm gonna love to see the day that Hal gets a Snapchat account.
Yeah, you probably won't live long enough. But no, I kind of embrace some of this technology now. But a lot of people use technology, I think, as a crutch, and I never did. Even a GPS. GPS is a great tool. We talked about it before, but I don't use it for a crutch. I use it as a handy tool, and it's the same way for that satellite imagery. I'll look at it. Sometimes what I do with it is it kind of puts together, I call it piecing the puzzle together, especially in a new area. You roam through it, but you didn't see a tenth of the area. So I can go home and I can bring that up and I can look and I say, oh, there's a bog in there. I missed that. You know what I mean? I can see if it was a bog over there. And then sometimes it helps you to figure out why if you followed a buck through there or you saw some buck sign in a place, it can help you piece that together a little better, because you can see if it's softwood, spruce fir or cedar bog or hardwood. You can tell all that. And then you can tell where you can see the choppings and stuff where they've cut. And, if they're not quite up to date enough, you might not see last year's or the year before's, but certainly you're going to see something there that'll help you kind of figure that area out.
I know how you love hidden cuts.
Yeah, the hidden cuts are the best, because the ones that show from the road, that's where everybody else goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is, it's just one of those things that's fun to surf around and really look with the information we have out there now, and if you can use that to your advantage and figuring an area out, every little bit can help.
Yeah. I've actually taken the leap forward into the 21st century, and I've got that mapping software with the InReach where I can go and I can download some of them satellite images into my iPhone, and then when I'm in the woods, it'll bring up exactly where I am. You don't need to have a cellular signal. A GPS in your phone, tells you where you are, and then I can have it on regular map or satellite imagery, whatever I want. And it really is a handy tool. I mean, it's kind of, I think about it, I kind of chuckle because, when I first started in the big woods, I had my compass and that was it. There was no GPS. There wasn't any of that. You looked around and you could see the next mountain or the next ridge, and you come to a stream. You didn't know much else about the woods other than your map. I always carried the topo maps, and that's how you learn things. But I think I think the new hunters or the younger generation, they've got a kind of a big advantage in a way to have all that stuff they can look at. But I warn everybody, just use it as a handy tool, not as a crutch. You know what I mean?
Don't rely on it too much.
Yeah, don't rely on it. Just use it for a helpful tool, It's still not going to make up for your other woodsmanship skills like your map and compass and all that.
It was when I first started hunting up in this area, we couldn't come up before season and go scout, and it was, we had our week and that was it. And so, you had to scout while you were hunting. And we more or less would just go to an area that was, seemed like it would be good, or cut a deer track and take off. And that was the extent of scouting. And, looking back, if the technology that's available now was available then, it would have been helpful, I think, in at least getting a start. And finding an area. Yeah.
Yeah. But for the guy that doesn't want to do that, like that, I don't know, but it sounds like that InReach and maps on your phone is pretty techie for somebody that's not that techie.
Well, it is, but I'm going to tell you something. Most of the time, all that stuff shut off.
Yeah. Oh, I
Yeah,
understand.
I don't.
That. Yeah.
That's what I say. Don't get. I know some people, they walk around with a GPS on all the time and tracking where they're going. If you're doing that, you're not hunting.
Right.
Just like I said, you got to just use that stuff as a tool, to check yourself if you're a little bit, confused about where you are maybe, or want to know what might be up ahead. Yeah, go ahead and break it out and take a look at it. But the more you're playing with all this electronic stuff in the woods, the more you're not hunting. You only got so many hours in a day to hunt. Don't be wasting it by not paying attention to, what's going on in the woods. If you're going to sit down, have a sandwich, that's the time to break that stuff out. Sit down, take a little break, look at your stuff, reorganize in your mind where you might be. That's about it.
It's I was just going to say that's not necessary. I did that last year and missed a nice buck where I thought, well, I sat down. It wasn't up here. It was about an hour south of what we really consider the big woods. It was on a piece of property there, and I was just still hunting through the woods and sat down for a few minutes to eat a sandwich. And I was figuring since I was sitting there, I'd blow my grunt call a couple times and maybe that would bring one in. Well, I did that and I grabbed my phone out and was just checking, looking at
Text.
something, texting. I don't know. Shouldn't have been looking at anything, but the next thing that buck had walked in and came in quiet. It was raining. It was wet that day. He came in quiet and was probably 20 yards away behind a fir tree. And when I went to put my phone away is when he blew at me and took off. Yeah. And I just don't mess with my phone anymore.
No. I leave it right in the truck.
Yeah, there's most places when you're in most big woods anyways, very rarely you're going to get a cell signal anyways. You might get on the top of a mountain and get some ping from somewhere, but yeah, just keep them off unless you need them.
I still haven't figured out, going back to the inReach, the feature you were talking about. I downloaded the same thing, and my inReach does not even have to be with me, and I can turn my phone on, and it basically acts like a GPS. I don't have to have signal, and it works. And
yeah, that's right. It's your GPS in your phone.
Yeah, but when I first I always thought that the inReach had to be there, turned on, and synced to it to be giving it that signal.
Nope.
But a lot of people don't realize that the your phone alone will work as a GPS.
Yeah,
with satellite imaging.
So I go on my into my inReach account on my laptop and I scroll around and find the section I'm going to hunt. And then you can kind of like highlight a certain block of woods, and then you just hit in your phone because you got an app on your phone that syncs you to your inReach, and you can download either just the topos or the aerials or whatever you want, and you hit download them, and it puts them in your phone. And the satellite imagery takes a lot of memory, so you can only have so many maps in there. So what I do is, like around here, I don't need to really use it. But if I'm going, like, say, to the Adirondacks, for example, where I'm going to hunt, well, I'll put in that area I'm going to hunt. And then after the season, I just take it back out because your phone doesn't have enough memory to keep half the world in there, or even a state in there. And that's all I do. I just click it in, click it out. Takes a few minutes and pretty handy.
So how often do you make calls out during the day, Lee, when you're hunting?
I don't know. My phone never holds a charge, so I just leave it in the truck plugged in, and that's what I do. But I am interested in that inReach thing. I know Hal had it last year or the year before when you came up and hunted.
Yeah.
And but I'm one of them guys. If it ain't easy, I'm not gonna put a lot of effort into it.
Well, one thing you gotta Lee, if I can do it, just about anybody can do it.
Right. But it does sound pretty handy. I may have to, maybe that'd be my new gadget for this year.
Yeah.
Just like Snapogram, right, Hal?
Snapogram.
Yeah, and I don't use, the only reason I say I got my phone, I'm not using it for the phone. I just shut that off anyways. You can put it on the airplane or whatever you do, but I just run it so I can see it, because I can see on that phone enough without my glasses. I can't see it on a GPS. The screens are too small to be able to see any detail, So that's what I use it for. And mine seems to hold it. It'll hold a charge. If you shut it down, if you take it off roamingly, that's the key. It's not searching for a signal, because if you don't have a signal, it's always searching. So you got to disable that.
I just learned something.
Yeah.
You
And
know-
then your battery will last all day.
Yeah, well, I'm wondering why every time I go in the woods, my battery's dead in a few hours. I'm like, what the
Yeah,
hell?
the antenna's going zing, zing, zing. Where's my signal? Zing, zing. I can't find it.
The aerial scouting, it's for moose hunting. I fly, so I scout before season by the air, and for moose, it's real effective to locate nice bulls and pockets of moose and that sort of thing. And I can only think of one time that I've seen a buck from the air, and it was one of the biggest bucks I've ever seen up here, rack-wise. Just a giant. We could see him from, we must have been 400 or 500 yards away when I first saw him out in the cut. I turned and came over him, and I was real low, and he looked straight up at me, and he had about a 12-inch drop tine coming down from one side on his right side. And
Where was that, Joe?
about 4 miles from here. It was just one of the most unbelievable bucks I'd ever seen up here with my own eyes, and it's the aerial thing doesn't work so well for deer, but that one it'll get you fired up.
Yeah.
And it was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, we talk about scouting for deer, but really when we scout for moose as professionals, the air is the best way to do it, I even scouted for trapping last week. Joe flew over and picked me up, and
Oh, yeah.
we were halfway between Rangeley and Jackman. And I screamed, "Look at the size of that beaver fluid!"
Yeah.
And it's easy to see because they're full of hardwoods, but there's no leaves on the hardwoods because they're dying off. And
I guess beaver trapping can be a topic for another day, but seems like there's just not enough trappers around these days.
Oh, there's
because-
not. And that's another whole.
Yeah,
Well, there's not
yeah.
enough woodsmen around anymore.
Yeah.
The problem is, I don't know what the problem is. The 20-year-old guys that work for me nowadays are more interested in, trying to find a girl. Well, I hate to tell them, but them girls are a dime a dozen, and you really don't need one until you get a little older.
Yeah.
Some people might beg to differ.
Yeah. But
All right.
I also, you brought up scouting for moose, Lee. I do a lot of, when I'm scouting for moose or I'm moose hunting, I'm looking for deer sign too. When you're in the woods, you learn it when you're guiding, but if people that are not guides or haven't been or just hunters, anytime you're in the woods, you should be scouting for everything, that interests you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for bear sign, a moose sign, a deer sign, and it always overlaps. You'll see moose sign when you're deer hunting and deer sign when you're moose hunting. So don't think you got to just be focused on one thing and forget about everything else you see in the woods. Take note of everything you're seeing in the woods, whatever the sign is.
Never stop looking for sign for sheds.
No.
Jeez.
I'll be going down a dirt road at 40, and all of a sudden I'll lock them right up, back up. And they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "See that anthill right there on the side?" Yeah. So we're looking at an anthill. No, what about the buck track in the side of that anthill? Oh, geez, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone has never hunted in this area before and they're coming up unguided and they want to get started on their own? Where would you suggest they start?
You talking to me?
I'm talking to you. Any ideas on that?
Forget about it.
Not specifically how. I'm not looking for names of roads here.
Oh.
It's intimidating for someone to come up into this country and start off.
That's right. But I tell people that's why we've been talking about maps, because without a map, this woods just looks like a big, huge piece of woods that goes on for hundreds of miles. So you have to have a map. You're not going to do much without a map. So I just tell people to look. The way I've scouted and looked for deer, I can take a day or a half a day into a huge piece of woods and decide if it's even worth going back to because of the way I look, and that's what you're asking. So if I'm going to look at a new area, I look at the maps, and what I look for is whatever there is for little streams in there. and even they might be wet trickles that run off a ridge. And they don't have to show as water on the map, because they could just show as like a depression, the way the contour lines point. Anything like that, you're going to know there's some kind of a spring seep or something off those ridges. But I follow the water because for a couple of reasons. It's basically usually it's a path of least resistance, so it's an easy way to cover some ground because water's generally flowing in the valleys where it's not as steep. And eventually, deer have to cross that water, especially a buck. I mean, he's crossing streams all the time. If it's a bigger stream, they usually cross in specific places. They don't usually on a natural pattern cross where they have to swim, unless it's a big river and they just have to. But most regular brooks or streams, they'll cross where there's a shallow spot, whether it's in a corner or some riffles or something. So you'll find that. But also, anywhere it's wet is where the brown ash grows. So we might as well talk about that. And that to me, is the key to unlocking, where the bucks are traveling, because it's where they make most of their signposts, on a brown ash tree.
That's a great place for us to take a break here, and when we come back, we can.
That's a deep subject.
Yeah, the old signpost rub.
And it's going to be like talking in Latin to a lot of people, because it's basically it's a tree that grows in the north, and so it's going to be a little hard for some people to understand what's going on with it. But we'll do the best we can to explain it when we come back.
All right. Hey guys, this is Joe. Just wanted to take a few minutes and talk a little bit about the lodge. It's Lake Parlin Lodge. We're up here just south of Jackman, and we're going to be doing some specials this deer season on our lodging. All the cabins are fully outfitted, modern, full kitchens, real comfortable accommodations. All of our packages are going to be Sunday to Sunday. We've got 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 2 bedrooms with lodge rooms. We've got what we call the mini lodge, which is a 5-bedroom, 5-bath for big groups. So check us out at lakeparlinlodge.com and check out our packages and come up and hunt the area. This is where the big woods bucks live. Look forward to hearing from you.
All right, welcome back. We're going to pick up the conversation with signpost rubs. I learned about them years ago just by I guess coincidence or whatever. I kept seeing, I'd be tracking these bucks, and I'd come to these rubs that were different. They looked different than the other ones. I kept looking at them like, what's different about them? Then I'd get down, just was my nature. I'd start looking closely and studying them, and I could see that they were rubbed year after year. I could count the tree's growth rings right in the rub. So I knew there was something different about those, because the bucks would always seem to end up. I can remember one place, this was early on, back probably 35 years ago, and every time I'd track a buck in this one area, might be a snowstorm, and I wouldn't even really know where I was, and then the next thing I know, I'm at this same spruce tree. It happened to be a spruce signpost, which is very rare, but every buck would always end up there, and I'm like, there's something about this. They end up here. So I just kept looking at them, and finally, I guess I figured it was a calling card or whatever, so I called them signposts. They're putting sign on them, which is a scent from their foreheads.
So is that a term that you actually coined, or did you see that somewhere else?
No, I never saw it. I just coined it, and I started using it when I wrote my first book back, I don't know, it's been 15 years ago, but everybody uses it now, but I think I probably did coin it. I never heard it before. And so anyways, what I learned up here, up in the North Maine woods, the northern tier, is for some reason that brown ash tree, it's really black ash. If you looked it up in a book, a tree book, it'd be black ash, but the old timers here called it brown ash, and it's the tree they use to make pack baskets and stuff. They strip the tree apart and makes nice pack baskets. But anyways, that's the tree they seem to use up north, in the northeast anyways. And it grows about as far south as central Maine, goes about that far south. And it's over in, all up in the north. Wherever there's spruce fir forest or boreal, you'll have it. New Brunswick, Quebec, northern New Hampshire, northern Vermont. The Adirondacks has it.
I was going to ask there in the Adirondacks too.
Yeah, and it seems to be the tree they prefer to signpost, and I always wondered why it was that tree, because it's more than 90% of the time that's what they're on. Once in a while I'll find a cedar, or like I said, a spruce, but it's almost always on those brown ash, and it's a tree that's not common. It's not a common tree in the woods. Grows in the wet area. Different, might be around a cedar bog or around a beaver flow, or anywhere there's some wet enough ground. It has to have a lot of water. It might be a spring seep on the side of a ridge, if it's seeded out there. But anyways, when I started hunting different areas, I noticed it might be a different tree. I noticed once you get down south of here, I found most of it turkey hunting. There'll be a signpost on red cedar. Red cedar is a popular one. And again, that's not a real common tree even, it grows around the edge of old pastures and stuff, and maybe in the woods a little bit. And then white oak seems to be a smaller white oaks they'll signpost, and hemlocks. And we don't have much for hemlock up north, but so there'll be different trees, but it's all the same effect. It's a place that bucks go and lay down their sign. And competing bucks both might rub the same one or one beside it, but it's just a place. I call it like a hub where different bucks meet up in the woods and mark their territories.
I wonder if it has something to do with the way the tree itself holds the scent.
Well, I think all those trees have a trait characteristic that's common, and that's the bark is a rougher, coarser bark.
Yeah, and I think it's right. I think it's absolutely right. That type of bark on those trees, especially that brown ash, the smaller ones, the bark is almost like balsa wood. If you grab the bark, it's like balsa wood, and I think it holds the scent. So I think that's probably it. But I did notice, when you get out, in Ontario, there's so much of that black ash. They don't signpost it. They'll rub it, but the signpost will be on a willow, which has a kind of not the same bark, but a bark that would tend to hold scent. So it's kind of interesting, but it's really the key, no matter where you're hunting. And I'm sure if you're down in Missouri or Tennessee or wherever you're at, there's going to be trees in the woods that are a signpost for bucks. That's critical to, I call it, breaking that big woods down into a smaller portion where bucks are likely to travel.
For me, I really I was always looking for what you would say is a conventional rub, where it's freshly rubbed and it's easy to discern. But the signpost, I never really picked up on until I started. You were telling me this and that, and read your book, and it does look different. I mean, I guess I always thought it was a damaged tree because they do look different. I mean, they're worn away. Like
a skidder drove by it and tore it up
right.
or something,
yeah.
But there's no skidder trail around it.
Well, a lot of people tell me that. When I show people, when I'm teaching my deer clinic, guys, you can see when I show them, it's like a light bulb comes on, and they're like, well, I've seen these before, but I thought it was a skidder tire come against a tree. I'm like, oh, geez, if it was, you should have noticed. There'd be a skid rut there.
Right. But, there's a difference in that, the signposts and the frustration rubs, I might call them, where a buck's early season, he just walks through a piece of woods and we've seen it where they'll rub half a dozen trees and just getting wound up, and ready to go, but never ever comes back to that spot. But
I had a buddy of mine. It was one of his first times up here hunting, and he was out for the day, and he told me this area he came across. He got on a rub line that was unbelievable. All these trees were rubbed up, and so he went on and on about it so much. I had him take me to the area, and it was rabbit chewings from the winter.
Yeah. I've had guys show up like that. They bring back pictures. You should see the spot I found today, and they got pictures of it. I said, that's rabbit chewing the bark off them maples. Because the first thing I ask people when they think they found one or they take a picture, I ask them what kind of tree is it on. And if it's not a brown ash, it's probably not going to be a signpost, right. And so the easy way to figure it out is whatever area you're in, and if we're talking about up here, is if you know that most of the time you're going to find a signpost, which is the most critical buck sign, you want to learn what the tree is and where it grows. So again, we'll get back to scouting and finding them. That's why I walk the wet areas, because that's where I'm going to find brown ash. So if I walk a stream or a brook or a wet run or a beaver bog, I walk it for a long, long ways. And then I might turn up another trickle up over a ridge, and I might cut through a ridge. When I scout, I make a big circle for the day, and that's going to tell me a lot about it. If I've walked that far and I found the brown ash and I found there should be signposts, because if I find brown ash and I find the right size and the right looking ones, if I don't find any rubs or any signposts, I don't have to always find signposts, but if I don't find anything rubbed up, there ain't many bucks around traveling through there, because they're not gonna be that many bucks around and not hit those brown ash trees. It just isn't going to be. So that will tell me a lot. I don't have to see tracks. I mean, I might go through one of them areas and see some tracks, but it's not going to be what I want. You know what I mean? But I can almost guarantee if you're finding a lot of, like, if you get into those areas and then there's some choppings and you find some doe tracks, there's going to be bucks around. More than likely you'll find some signposts if that's growing. Quite frankly, I've hunted a lot of places and never could find a signpost because there's no brown ash that grows there. So it's kind of strange, but it's just the way it seems to be.
Always seems like the signposts are bigger too. You never see them on a 2-inch, or I won't say never, but.
Well, by virtue of what they are, they tend to be bigger. The bigger ones are easier to spot, for one thing, because when you see a 8 or a 10-inch tree rub, you get pretty excited about it, And in the fall, when you see them, the way that bark turns color when they rub the bark off, the tree it almost looks fluorescent orange, especially on a damp, wet day. I mean, I can spot a brown ash rub like 100 yards up through the woods. It's almost like looking at somebody in a blaze orange hat or something. And those bigger ones have just been rubbed longer. That's why you notice them more. But usually they're started on a smaller tree. And I've found them that have been rubbed so many years that they had to been started when they're, an inch in diameter or even smaller, and then they just keep rubbing them. And a lot of times they kill them, and then it don't last. But I found one time, I remember, it had been rubbed on both sides for so many years. I knew it was started when it was little because it was literally rotted through the middle of the tree. You could get down and look right through the tree, and it had 2 live pieces, one on each side. It's pretty exciting when you find stuff like that. So that tells you, and by virtue of the big ones, guess what? Say a buck lives up here an average of 10 years. If you see a signpost that's more than 10 years old, and usually those bigger ones are, guess what? Tells you it's generational. Different bucks use it, and one buck dies and another one continues it or whatever. So it's just the key place for everything, for scouting. Because you can use a signpost. I mean, I use them I go and try to pick up tracks. If there's a place where I know there's some signposts, in a snowy morning, that's where I head. I'll go, if I got a piece of woods and there's 3 or 4 signposts in, several miles in there, I just go from one to the next and looking for a track.
Was that a signpost, that buck, it was in your first book, that monster that was killed, 180-inch buck or whatever that the young kid killed? You set him up.
Yeah.
Was there a signpost rub there that you set him on?
Yeah, there actually was. That was a funny story because that spot we had scouted, it was kind of a unique area because the bucks were there year round. It was actually back then a wintering area, and I used to see deer tracks around the edge of the lake, so I started poking around in there, and before the snow got too deep, and I started finding some signposts in there, and I'm like, Jesus, some bucks around in here. So it was when we used to go up the lake there for the remote hunt. This was the other end of the lake, so it was like a 5-mile trip to get down there. So we decided we'd go try to hunt that. So we went over and scouted around in the fall, and we found enough places to put about 6 blinds in. We made ground blinds for the hunters, which is the way they usually hunted a lot. And a lot of them were on these signposts. But I hadn't found this particular area where we shot that buck. I found it by following a buck by there. The first week we had snow, and we couldn't get down the lake till about Wednesday. And I found it by following a buck, and he went down there, and there was a signpost, and then there was 3 or 4 more rubs or more. And there was an intersection of 2 little trails, because in this particular place, usually we don't have a lot of deer trails up in this big woods, but there was in there because they were their winter trails. There was an intersection, and then right off that intersection, there was a nice scrape, which is what I call an annual scrape, and that was 50 yards or so from that signpost. So I said, "Whoa, what a place!" I got a signpost, I got rubs, there's an intersection of a trail, and that's just how I picked it up there. I found that, and I put that guy on that. It was kind of a boulder about 8 feet high with some little spruces on it. And that's where I set him. I said, "You crawl up on that boulder right there and sit there." And the funny thing was, I took a guy in there the day after I found it. There was a couple days left in the week. And a guy went in there. I took him in. He sat both days, but he'd come out like about 11. He'd come out and he'd have lunch. He'd be gone for a couple hours and then go back in. He never saw a thing. So the next week, Sunday, when the new crew showed up in camp, I said, it was a long way back in, too. That's one reason I said that. I said, I got to have a volunteer that'll commit to sit in this spot the whole week if that's what it takes. I said, I'm pretty sure you'll kill a good buck in there or see one or something. So this young guy piped up and said, I can do that, because he was from Pennsylvania, and that's all he did was tree stand hunt anyway. So anyway, make a long story short, the first morning I took him in there, he shot that buck at 11 o'clock right there.
And you've seen the pictures of that buck.
Oh, yeah. Who hasn't seen the pictures?
Right.
Yeah.
That thing is, I remember the first time I saw the pictures of that. It's one of the biggest racks I've ever seen from this area. Yeah. Just an unbelievable rack.
Yeah. I never, and the funny thing was, that's the mystique about hunting in these woods. You never know what you're going to find. And, but that buck, one of the guys in camp had hunted in Saskatchewan quite a bit and shot some nice bucks. When he saw that thing, he goes, that thing's Boone and Crockett. And I knew it was a big rack. I mean, it had long tines, and so we dragged it in the tent that night. We got back to camp, and we dragged it right up into the sleep tent, the front end of it. And I was a scorer, for the Maine's Antler Club, so we scored it up, and we come up with 170, just a little over 170, but it had 4 non-typical points. It had split G2s, and it had a couple of stickers. It had, I think, 11 and a half inches, which scoring it typically brings it out of Boone and Crockett. So everybody now goes gross score, which if you add everything up, it was like 184 or something. But it had 15-inch. It was an 8-pointer to score that, too. It scored, if it was a clean 8-pointer, scored over 170 as an 8.
Huh. That must have been what, the late 90s?
Yeah, I think
somewhere around that time frame.
That was earlier 90s, early to mid 90s when we were still up the lake there. But that's the biggest rack buck we've ever got there at the lodge. But you know what the best part was? Weighed 245. See, that's more important. Yeah, it was just
I guess to some.
Yeah, that was just one of them big old bucks. He was just a beautiful buck.
That picture I remember, that was in that Bishop's at the tag station. And any night we'd come in and see what was tagged and stuff, we'd all go in there and just look at that thing. And I mean, that buck was what dreams were made of, man. That thing was just unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny part about guiding. I've guided all these hundreds of hunters over the years, and they've all shot bigger bucks than I have, you know what I mean? Right. Better racks and all that. But I guess I had something to do with it.
Oh, I guess you did. Yeah, and that it goes to show too. I mean, we love to track and we love moving and not sitting a lot, but it can be pretty productive. You find the right spot.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, you put a lot of guys on stand, Ali.
Yeah, you never know what you're dealt with, and you can only hunt to the client's ability. And even the best hunters, they're not conditioned to go all week like we are by that time of the year. And So by Wednesday or Thursday, they need a break, and you have to have those spots filed away. And I don't know how many we've shot on tree stand, but I know of one big 200-pounder we named Bob that was shot in on a tree stand, and then there was a 7-pointer shot in that same spot a couple years later. Then we had the one at the bottom of Master Guns that the guy shot a 7 down there, or a 5 down there, but he thought he was shooting a 10. The 7 and the 5 and the 10 were running together, and he watched them for a bit. For some reason, he didn't shoot. They came out into an opening, and the 5 had changed spots with the 10 in the brush, and he shot the first one that came out. But set a lot of guys on stand, and all had opportunities, or you don't just pick a spot and set somebody. A lot of work goes into making that decision.
Yeah.
Didn't you said, I know you've put cameras on Signpost before. Have you set one for a long period of time, like through a season yet?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one I told you that my buddy Steve shot, that was there for the season. And when I pulled that camera, I had over 100 pictures on it. And I learned something. That was back when I first started doing it. It was, I think, about 8 years ago, first started putting those cameras out. And what I learned from it was I had big bucks, little bucks, does, everything. It was in an area that, it was in a place where there was a deer trail kind of near there anyways. But I've since got other does at them. And I think the does, because they're seeking out the buck they want to breed with, they pay attention to those signposts. So who's there, is it Larry, Harry, or Mo? You know what I mean? They know each other by communicating through scent. So it's pretty interesting to see that. But
that'd be kind of a fun experiment. Just, this season, put out, 8 or 10 on Signpost, let them run through the season and see what we come up with.
I'm going to do that. Last year, I put 3 out in one area. I was trying to do my own little test. I've only got 3 of them, but I put 3, and I wanted to see. There was 3 signposts within a mile and a half. They were about a half a mile apart, each one. And I wanted to see myself is it the same bucks going to all 3 of them, or is it all different bucks? I just was trying to make a little experiment because by scouting it didn't look like the trails. It was kind of along this brook, and it didn't look like the trails. There was one trail that followed the brook, so I figured 2 of them probably were the same. But there was a lot of crossings on the brook going like perpendicular to the way the cameras were laid out. But anyways, what I found out was, one camera, the SD card was bad, so I was only working with 2 when I picked them up. But I had, on those 2 trail cameras, I had, I think 4 or 5 good bucks, shooter bucks on them, and then a bunch of little ones, yearlings or 2.5-year-olds or whatever. And about half of them were the same buck, had come to 2 of those, and those 2 were they were a mile apart. So I'm not conclusive on it, but I did learn that they don't all go to all of them in an area, which I never thought they did. I thought they had certain ones they went to, and just the way each buck doesn't travel the same way as the other one, but they definitely travel certain places in the same paths, and they cross paths at certain areas. If you think about if you laid it out as a spider web, there's always, their territories overlap in places with different bucks, and that's just the way it is. But it's pretty interesting, and you get to see what's actually there. So I see enough good bucks on those 2 cameras. I think I'll put a little time in there and we get some snow this year.
Where was that, Hal?
Huh? Where was that? That was Forgotten Brook.
Oh, yeah.
Popular place.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where that was.
Well, the last thing we're going to touch on when we come back is, which we've talked about a little bit, is trail cameras, which is, to me, more of a hobby than anything.
Yeah.
Just fun to do, but they can be a useful tool also. So
yeah,
we'll come back and talk about that some. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to go to the Big Woods Bucks website and join the hunting club. On there, you'll find short films of Hal's hunts, video tips and articles written by Hal, as well as a forum where you can go on there and talk with fellow hunters and learn a few things while you're at it. There's a lot of good stuff on there, and we think it's going to be a great place for hunters to just communicate, and talk about a common interest. Check us out at bigwoodsbucks.com. All right, welcome back.
So how would you use one of those game cameras to break down a buck's territory?
Good question, Lee. I've always said that bucks use in the big woods about 10% of their territory that they roam. So if they've got a 10 or 20 square miles that they call home, that buck's really only using about 10% of that, I figure. So guess what? We want to hunt in that 10%. So, and that's where you're going to find your signposts and most of your buck sign is where they're traveling. And that's a key. It's a key because that's where you want to hunt. You don't want to hunt in the 90%. You want to hunt in the 10%. But so that's where I like to put them on those signposts. Like I said, it's really for me. Joe had mentioned it's more for fun than anything. I don't ever say I'll go back there and think I'm going to hunt a particular buck I saw on a trail camera, because it's not really reality in the kind of country I hunt in. Not reality. So I just use them for fun, see what's there. But using those signpost rubs, there's another thing I'll talk a little bit about is annual scrapes. That's another good ticket to where the older bucks are traveling. But that's how you figure out your 10%. And you can use that 10% whether you're tracking, still hunting, or stand hunting. That's where you want to hunt. So if you're a stand hunter, guess what? That's where you want your stand. You want it around a signpost rub or maybe an annual scrape or something where several bucks might travel through there. Or later in the season, get around where the does are. If you're a still hunter, when I still hunt on bare ground, I call it still hunting / scouting. That's where I travel. I don't still hunt randomly up through the beautiful open hardwood ridges because I can see good. I still hunt down along the edges and the peripherals where those bucks travel, along them streams and wet areas where I find the buck sign. Because guess what? That's going to be the best place to run into a buck that might be up pussyfooting around during the day from still hunting. So that's just kind of the way you would use that sign when you're hunting in the big woods. Well, that's what I do anyway.
Yeah, and I mean the trail camera thing is somewhat of a recent phenomenon. I remember when the early years ago, they sell those little strings that would.
I had a couple of those
for that would trip.
I used a couple for bear hunting, and the bears ate them.
But I mean, I remember when I was a kid seeing those. Oh wow, I got to get one of those and see what's coming through. Thought it was. I mean, you liken it to setting up some soda cans.
Yeah,
they were going to make noise or something because all that was telling you is something walked through there.
That's
one
right.
thing, but
now the guys want to have a trail camera that takes a picture and it sends it to their iPhone.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that works, but I just know I don't. Somebody bought me one once for Christmas and never took it out of the box. Still in the box, actually. That was 10 or 15 years ago. But
is that right?
Yeah, true story. And but I guess because I know a lot of guys that use them, and just recently had some friends bear hunting, and they had bears coming. They came up for a week to hunt, and they couldn't leave those cameras alone. And next thing you know, the bears aren't coming as much, and everything kind of shuts down, and nobody understands. Well, you can't have a path to your game camera and expect not to change the deer's habits or the bear's habits. Do you see what I'm saying? You haven't been there all season. September 1st or October 1st, you run down there and you set a camera and you can't stand it, so you have to check it every day or every other day. Well, guess what? The animals in that area figure that out, and you just train them to go somewhere else. Now, setting one on a signpost rub and leaving it for the season, well, that's a whole other story,
That's all I do. When I put a trail camera out, it's going to be there for the season because I ain't going to go back there just to look at a trail camera. I could care less. I'm just interested to see what might have been there and see the bucks and all that.
Yeah, that's one of those things that you learn quickly, and it is it's a good point.
It doesn't take long to train an animal.
No.
Yeah.
Inadvertently, you know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people, the problem with a trail camera is everybody thinks it's going to tell them when an animal's coming, and it's not going to tell you when an animal's coming. It's going to tell you when an animal was there.
Right.
That don't mean he's coming back again that time, or, animals aren't on a time. And I mean, once in a while, yeah, somebody will get lucky and say, "Oh, I got a bear comes at 6:30 every day," and that possibly could be true, but that's a real exception to the rule.
Right.
And the same thing for deer. It don't mean a deer is coming at a particular time. And again, we're relating this stuff to the big woods. If you're down on a farm and a buck comes out a certain time to feed on your soybeans or whatever, we're not really talking about that. These bucks in the big woods, they're probably, I figure, it's about 3 days before they even get back through the same area. So you can waste a lot of time in the wrong places, and I think half the time even those trail cameras will make you choose the wrong way. You think you're choosing the right thing, they're making the right decision because, oh, he came here at a certain time, I got to be here at a certain time. Doesn't mean nothing.
Right.
Tells you when they've been. So again, nice, helpful tool, fun tool to use, but don't use a trail camera thinking it's the end all. It's the ticket to success.
I'm going to show Lee a picture here that it's the reason. One of the reasons I like trail cameras is because I'm showing a picture of a giant buck, probably 160 class buck.
Where was that, Joe?
Forgotten Brook.
Oh,
How much
a lot
you-
of deer in there.
How much you think it'll? All I care about is how much you think it'll weigh.
You taught me how. You can never tell from a picture.
Yeah, that's right. I say,
But it's my point on that is and just seeing, for me it's seeing what's roaming around out there, and we discussed it before, and moose hunting. I mean, I've got 10 cameras. We're going to go up tomorrow and set out and let them sit there for 3 weeks, and I'll look forward to going and checking them out just to see what's running around, but I don't expect to necessarily kill one of those moose.
right.
No, but it might take you. You might lean towards a certain area on
absolutely.
open day. If there's a 60-inch bull kicking around one spot,
Or if you catch him on camera, 4 different days or something.
Yeah, and if he's got a few cows in there, if you pick up pictures of different cows and he's got enough to keep him content right there, then it's a good spot.
And if you are going to use cameras, I've never thought about getting one of them just because they're so expensive. The ones, you got to have the plan where it uploads to your phone and all that, that type. But
Then you got to have cell service.
correct, which we don't have here.
Right.
But if you are doing that, it's better, I think, because you're not going in there and stinking the area up and educating the animals. But although I've seen enough deer staring straight into the camera that they 100% absolutely notice it, see it. Every animal that goes by knows that camera doesn't belong there.
Right.
And if I am going to leave a camera for a long time, I'll put it 15 feet up in a tree and I'll aim it down so they don't notice it. But I mean, like the one I just showed you, he's pretty much looking at the camera. You know, they have infrared and they have all that fancy stuff. The deer, all the animals know.
They see that infrared at night.
They
I've
do.
got pictures of deer right staring at it, nose right up to it at night, just kind of looking at like, what the heck is this,
Yeah. And when it comes to bear hunting, for whatever reason, boy, they love, I don't know if it's the scent or whatever it is, but they love tearing them apart.
A bear's a different creature. A bear is just curious. Anything that's out of place, they got to fool with it, everything. You could throw a diesel can out in the woods, a 5-gallon diesel can in the woods, and every bear that sees it's going to play with it. I don't care if it smells like diesel or not. Right. They're going to bite it and they're going to drag it around. It's just, that's the nature of a bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's always for me it's like leaving them out, like what we're gonna do.
Yeah.
Here up north is like Christmas morning when when I go out and pick all those cameras up.
Yeah, mystique of it.
However, you want to be sure that you set, and for people that don't use them a lot, like you, Lee, there's off, there's setup, and there's on. And I
What are you
can't
looking
tell
at me
you,
for, Joe?
I can't tell you how many times, as much as I think about it, when I set the camera out, all right, I got to be sure. I'll put it on that setup mode to format it or do something, and I'll come back a month later, and I forgot to flick it to on, and that happens.
Yeah.
So.
The other thing you got to remember is the size of your SD card. I made that mistake last spring. I put 2 or 3 cameras up in remote, and I said, I'm going to leave them here all summer. I put them out when I did my deer clinic in May, put them on Signpost, and I said, I'm going to set these things on a photo and a 10-second video. And so I did. I went back, and I wouldn't go back to them. I just left them there. I was in there in September in bear season and everything, and I didn't pick them up. And I went and picked them up, I think, in October or something. And I'm thinking I'm going to have all these nice pictures of deer. They lasted, the cards were full in 2 weeks. I never got a thing all summer because the cards were used up. And one of them was a big signpost, must have been a foot in diameter, all shined up there in October.
No.
Oh, I looked at that. Not all it was this one particularly. What happened, I didn't realize, I put it there right when things were growing, and some weeds grew up in front of it when the wind, it was kind of a little open. The wind was, I had nothing but wind pictures, and it filled the SD card up in about 2 weeks. And then the other one, I got pictures of a sow and a cub. Well, the cub was climbing one of the signposts. And then I got a picture of a great big bear at a spruce tree behind him rubbing his back.
No kidding.
And I didn't have a lot, but I only had like it was like a 256 kilobyte one or something. It was one for photos, so that was burning up.
Kilobyte.
Yeah, whatever it was.
Yeah, put that on your Snapagram, Hal.
Yeah, kilobyte, willabyte, kenabyte, whatever a byte is. But anyways, I didn't get the pictures I want. It was discouraging when I saw the nice buck sign there, and I got no pictures.
Or you'll get just which has happened numerous times. You'll get just a big body, and right where you'd see that, the antlers are either covered up, they're off camera, or behind a tree. I had a spot that I really like to deer hunt. That's it's like a major travel corridor, and then it's migration route in December. So I stuck a bunch of cameras in there, just curious to see what would be migrating through there, and went and got them, and it was pretty cool to see. I mean, I got a pile of deer on there, and a couple really nice bucks on it, and so it's fun off season too.
Yeah.
But so in wrapping up our discussion on scouting the big woods, how would you summarize for guys coming up? Basically, come up and hunt and learn it on the run.
Well, I think I tell people when you come to hunt the big woods, you almost got to forget about what you know about farm country hunting or suburban hunting. It's you might as well forget that and start over. I used to have guys show up at the camps, and they got their tree stands in their trucks, and they're all ready to go, and they show up on Sunday, and we're gonna go out and pattern our deer. And I'm like, I don't think you're gonna pattern any deer up here, but you can go for it. But so I just tell people, forget about, the important thing is forget about feeding bedding areas, because it's not going to matter unless you find, a cut where the does are and hoping the bucks come there. But the bucks ain't coming there to feed. They're coming there later in the season to check on them does, and just scout for the buck sign. The buck sign will tell you where the bucks are traveling, and that's really where you got to hunt. And if you do that and you follow that water and you pick some places that look good, you can find some deer in the big woods. That's not going to be, don't set an unrealistic expectation about all these deer you're going to see, because you're not. But I'm telling you, when you see the buck sign, those big rubs on those 10, 12-inch brown ash trees, and you start seeing that sign, you'll get excited enough, you'll want to hunt there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well-
Don't get discouraged, right?
That's absolutely right. And again, I think we've said it before. I tell people the last day of your hunt, the last hour is just the same as the first hour of your hunt. It's the same. You got the same odds of seeing something.
New
Right.
Hampshire, 4 years ago, we shot the movie.
Yeah.
I killed a Maine buck and had to butcher it up. They needed a buck for this movie. For the opening scene of the movie, it was a buck. So I shot the Maine buck, and it was warm. I says, well, I'm not waiting.
That was the movie, The Guide, right?
Yeah, the movie The Guide. And last day of New Hampshire season at, I don't know, daylight, I cut a buck track. I knew it wasn't a huge buck, but I figured out if it's got horns, it'll make the movie. And put the boogie on, and 10:30 that morning I killed him. So, and I had hunted for, New Hampshire's, you can hunt Sundays, so I had hunted 7 days as hard as I possibly could, and was in a little bit looking forward to the end of the season. And,
You're a little run down by
oh
then.
yeah, that last day was good. So
That was a good drag.
that was a real good drag. That was funny. We was talking about that earlier. That buck's horns was wide enough that I could fit between them. So when I went and set my gun and I came back, I lifted him up and his horns went right around my hips. It was the most comfortable drag I'd
Oh, yeah.
ever
A
had.
pretty nice buck then.
Yeah, one, another one of them 196s or 198s.
Yeah,
know.
but that's a big one, the end of the season like
Yeah.
that. Those are the 225 pounders,
It's always funny because the ones you shoot that are under 200 pounds, the conversation starts with, geez, it had a nice set of horns, but it only weighed.
Right.
And the ones that are over 200 pounds, you start with, well, it weighed 214. A decent set of horns.
Yeah, that's funny. My last 2 bucks in Maine was that way. One was 195 and 196 the
Yeah.
last 2 years, right at the end of the season. Yeah, same thing. Yeah. Geez, people see the rack on the one last year. Holy, that's a nice rack there. What'd that thing weigh? Geez, only weighed 196.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
you
that always kills
And
me.
you're looking at the ground when you say it.
Yeah, you're embarrassed, right? That's me. I'm embarrassed if it don't weigh 200.
I passed up a couple last year. One was a chip shot, daylight. This thing standing in a chop with a doe. Had a decent rack of horns, but you could clearly tell it was was nowhere near 200 pounds. But I'm like, just can't do it. Can't listen to Hal say, well, I'd just shoot that for,
Well, that's going to wrap up another episode. Thanks for listening in. And Hal, what's I know we're going to do some question and answer type things. Where will people go on to pose their questions and comments?
Yep. You go right onto the website at bigwoodsbucks.com.
Yep. So as we go along here, we're gonna be doing we'll be picking out those questions and answering them for you as they relate to the topics we're discussing. So if there's something you want to talk about or have a question on something, go right on the Big Woods Bucks website. And
it might even be a prize for the best question.
uh-oh, I love mysteries. Thanks for tuning in.
Yep.
See ya. Hey, thanks for tuning in. Till next time, good luck on the trail.